It's a covering coffee kind of day. Well, technically, it's not coffee, it's tea. Well, actually, it's not even tea, it's empty. Ha! I made a joke, empty. Um, and the reason why is because the few times I've recorded video in the past while drinking tea, I just end up taking like 2 sips, and by the end of the video, the tea is cold and it sucks. I'm like, you know what? Let me skip that step this time and just pretend I have tea, even though this whole explanation kind of ruins that. So, yeah, moving on. This video is not about covers or tea or even coffee. It's about the process that I went through and really what it was like to say farewell to all my loved ones. But before I get into that, I just want to quickly mention something. If you've seen the last video, you're gonna know that yesterday really sucked. And the ironic thing about that is I often record my videos the day before I publish them. So even though the video I uploaded this morning was a video of me like everything frickin' sucks and I just wish I could give up but I can't. And luckily for me, I had a very good night. In fact, the best night I've had in a very long time. I managed to sleep 7.5 hours without waking up. Which may not seem like a big deal to most people, but I cannot remember the last time that happened. It's definitely been multiple months since that's happened. You know, I could have slept more in terms of hours, but just the fact that I slept 7.5 hours continuously without waking up is a very good sign. And as a result of that, I feel much better this morning, which is why you know, I did the whole tea, coffee thing. I don't know. Because I'm weird. That's why, actually. Anyway, let's get into the video. So, in the last few videos, I talked about how I went through the process of, saying farewell to all my loved ones. That way I can surrender for good, and whatever's meant to happen, I'm going to be okay with that. I'm going to be ready for that. So if I'm meant to die, well, I said my farewells. I don't have any regrets. There's nothing holding me back, and I can just accept whatever's meant to happen. And as you might expect, that was a very unique experience. It's not something that I've ever experienced before. The closest I came was a few years back. I used to do a challenge every single week. And one week, the challenge was, hey, let's pretend that I'm dying and tell the people that I love how much I care about them. And, there's a big difference between doing it because it's a challenge and you just kind of want to have that experience, and doing it because there's a very real possibility that you could die. So it was definitely something that I'd never experienced before. And there was varying degrees to it. So there was the group of people who I couldn't see face to face. Most of them were friends. Some of them live in different countries, some of them nearby, but it's just because of the holidays and everything, there wasn't a chance for me to see them in person before the new year, where I really went through that process of letting go. So the only option was to do it over the phone, and I ended up doing it by voice message. So I sent each one of them a voice message explaining like, hey, here's the situation, this is why I'm doing this. I want to take the time to let you know how important you are to me, how much I love you, how much of an impact you've had on my life. And I want you to know that no matter what ends up happening, it's okay, I'm at peace with it. To kind of get an idea, you can go back and watch one of my previous videos where I, said farewell to all of you guys. The process I went through with my friends was similar to that. And, the intensity of that, of course, varied depending on who it was. So the friends that I sent voice messages to, relatively simple. I would say it's pretty much on the same level as the video I recorded for the channel. And then the next level would be when I went to visit my sister and, had a conversation individually with each of my family members. So there was my dad, there was my sister, there was my mother, my uncle, and my brother-in-law. Obviously, I didn't have that conversation with my niece and my nephew. My niece, simply because it's like, she's 7 years old, like she wouldn't necessarily understand. Plus, like I don't want to put her through that. It just seems mean. So, I didn't do it for that. And my nephew, he's a couple months old, so it's like, why would you have a conversation with a 4-month old? He won't understand you anyway. So, having the conversation with those people was slightly more intense, obviously, because, it's face to face. I can see their reaction. And, I'm still, at this point, I'm very used to being open and sharing everything and not holding anything back. And, knowing that it might affect certain people more than others. Unsurprisingly, my father would not look me in the eyes the entire time simply because he's the type of person who has a very, very, very difficult time expressing his emotions. And, having that conversation was obviously difficult for him because I'm his son. So, that went relatively well. I feel like he might have had like some tears in his eyes, but nothing came out. But still, it was a good conversation, and I'm glad I went through that process. My sister went relatively well, although because of her kids and everything, there were a few interruptions, and at the end she didn't really get a chance to react because I forget what happened exactly. I think like the baby started crying or something like that. She had to breastfeed him or something, so it's like we never really got to conclude that. But it's like I said what I had to say. And, if she feels the need to say something, she knows that I'm here and I'm willing to listen. So that's not really an issue. When it came to my uncle, he's always been very open-minded, always been very respectful and encouraging of my beliefs and my decisions and everything. So his reaction was pretty much the same to that. Just, like, hey, thank you for letting me know, like, I love you too. Keep doing what you're doing the right thing. Blah, blah, blah. We shared a hug. Everything was great. And I kind of did like my uncle and my brother-in-law at the same time because it just happened. That was the timing. And it's ironic because of all the people that I spoke to, ignoring my wife for now, but of all the people I spoke to, he's the only one who teared up and actually had tears. Not just like, oh, his eyes are a little wet, like actual tears. And I don't know, it kind of touched me because, like, he's my brother-in-law. We're not technically blood related. And the fact that, me just sharing that with him brought him to tears, literally. It's just like, it makes me feel grateful to have him in my life. So, that went pretty well. It's not really difficult. It's just, I didn't know what to expect when it came to my mother because if you've been following my story for a while, last year I came to the point where I realized like it's not good for me to have my mother in my life anymore. She's a negative influence on me. I cannot afford to have that kind of person in my life. So I just cut ties. And there was no resentment on my part. I didn't, hate her or anything like that or had any grudge or nothing. It was just like I need to do what's best for me. And fortunately, what's best for me is to end our relationship. But I felt there was like some unfinished business on her part. Like she didn't really understand. She wasn't able to understand and believe that I had no, resentment or anything towards her. It's just like I was doing what I felt was right. So I'm like, it's important to go through this process with her. And at the same time, she'll get a chance to express whatever she needs to express. So went to visit her. We had a conversation. There were a few moments in the conversation where, her typical teacher personality came out where she had to, convince everyone else that she's right and that they're wrong and teach them even though they don't want to be taught. But that was very, very minimal. I was surprised by how well that conversation went. So kind of like with everyone else, I just shared what I had to share, explained what I had to explain, and let her speak, say whatever she had to say. And I think we finally came to an understanding because, the way it's been, I don't want to go into too much detail. I've spoken about this in previous videos, but, when I was young, my mother left and she pretty much rejected us as her children. She's like, hey, you're no longer my son. We can be friends, but you're not my son anymore. And for most of my life, I pretended like that was okay just because I wasn't ready to let go of that relationship yet. And it was only last year when I realized like my mother is not a positive influence in my life. I have to let her go, that I was really able to surrender. And it's like, at this point, she's not my mother. I still call her my mother just because, you know, blood speaking, like relatively speaking, she is. But it's like she hasn't played that role for a very long time. And, it's just that bond does not, no longer exists. So because of that, last year when I'm like, okay, she has a negative influence on me, she's not really my mother at this point, there's no reason for us to be friends because we're so different as people that we would never be friends if it wasn't for the fact that she was my mother. And it's just like, that's what I was able to explain to her this time, and I think she understood it. It was that it's like, we're so different people, our views of the world and how we choose to live our lives are so different, we would never be friends. The only reason why we would be friends is because you're my mother, but you're no longer my mother. So there's literally no reason for us to be friends. Why would we try to force a relationship when there doesn't need to be any? So anyway, we had a conversation. I said what I had to say. She said what she had to say. I do feel like we've kind of, gotten to a place where we kind of understand each other and realize basically we're both on the same page. That's what it feels like. Once again, I have no way of knowing exactly how she perceives the situation, how she feels inside, but it seems like, we've come to a good place. So it's definitely good that I did that. So that was pretty much it for my family. Now, the most difficult conversation I had was with my wife. Obviously, she loves me the most and cares about me the most and has seen me, suffer for the last year and a half and knows everything I've been through and everything. And I know that she tends to, we all have subconscious patterns and everything, and it's like we each respond to things in different ways. And I know she has this habit of, unfortunately, kind of focusing on the negative and imagining all the bad things that could happen. And to her, when I tried to explain this, it felt to her like I was giving up. Like, hey, I can't do this anymore. I'm just surrendering. I'm giving up. I'm gonna let myself die. So I had to really take the time to explain everything. And to be clear, it's like, I'm not just gonna give up and let everything be up to God and whatever's meant to happen will happen. It's like, I'm still gonna do immunotherapy. I'm still gonna take the medications to treat the symptoms. I'm still gonna eat healthily, do whatever I feel is right, to just have a good life, to survive this period of my life and let whatever's meant to happen happen, whether that is to be healed and keep living or to die. I'm okay with the outcome, but that doesn't change the fact that I'm still going to keep doing whatever feels right inside. So, it was a little difficult for her to hear, and it was complicated for me to explain, especially because I'm still not completely fluent in Spanish. So it was definitely a difficult conversation, and she cried a lot, and it was very difficult for her. But it's been a while since then. I think it was on the 27th that I had a conversation with her. So at this point, it's been almost a week. And I feel like it's really helped. Like, even though it was difficult for her, she was able to process it and understand it. And she's come to realize, like, okay, that was the right thing. Like, I needed to do what I did to go through that process of surrender. And in order to do that, I had to say farewell to all my loved ones, including my wife, because there's a chance that I could die. And it's like, even though that's painful, it was a very good thing that I did it. And it, to me, like, there wasn't like this huge significant shift inside of like, oh, well, now I feel like completely free, like this weight has been lifted off my shoulders and everything's great. It's like the symptoms are still there. It still sucks, as you saw in the last video, but it's like at the end of the day, it's just like I've surrendered, I've let go of the ocean, basically adrift in the ocean, and it's up to God to either save me or let me die, and either way, I'm okay with the outcome. So now it's just a question of letting myself drift until whatever's meant to happen happens. And I'm at peace with that because I've said my farewells, I've done what I had to do. And even though I hope I survive and I still believe that's what's going to happen, you know, I have no expectations. It's basically that. I'm still positive. I still do what I have to do to try to feel as good as I can every day and keep myself healthy and everything. But at the end of the day, I have no expectations. So whatever's meant to happen is going to happen, and I'm okay with that. So yeah, it was definitely an interesting experience, but one that I'm very glad I went through. And no matter what happens, at least now I'm ready. And yeah, I think that's about it. If there's anything that I forgot, I'll just mention in one of my next videos. So thank you for watching, and I'll talk to you in the next video.